while a UFC fight had just concluded with Myson Tybura taking on Tai Tuivasa. So it's basically a Tai versus Tai match. And guess what? From the very beginning, the fight was an absolute barn burner from the very beginning. I mean, Myson Tybura came out with a front kick, tried to establish dominance in the center of the cage straight away. And then what happened in the process? Well, Tai Tuivasa actually cut him up, rocked him a few times, gave him a big gash in his head, and lo and behold, guess what happens? Myson Tybura comes back and basically ends the fight, takes him in a ground and pound position after taking him down, and just basically finished the fight right there. I mean, just absolutely. So, what's going on here? Is this on? Okay, sorry about that. All right, just making sure that we're on and popping right there. So, okay. So, let's talk about the co-main event of the evening as well with Brian Lonesi. So, Brian Battle was winning the entire fight, winning every exchange there was. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, guess what happens? He goes and gets a little bit of an eye poke, right? And apparently, it seems as if he wasn't able to see, right? He was saying like, oh, I can't see or this and that. The doctor was going to give him 5 minutes. But as soon as you say you can't see, man, the doctor literally has no choice but to stop the fight immediately. And so that is exactly what the doctor did, was stop the fight in the middle of that. And then after he stopped the fight, it looked like they were sort of trash talking each other, saying, yeah, I'm going to end you or unalive you and all that, and I'm going to fight you in a parking lot. And, you know, a lot of emotions that were going on in that particular fight, right? And then obviously Oben St. Preux, he had a decision win, just as I had predicted he was going to. Made a great account decision win over Isaac Dulurjurian. Sorry if I mispronounced his name in any kind of way. But that was a good fight as well. There's every one of those fights was all right. It was just another fight night in and of itself. But obviously, Myson Tybura and Tai Tuivasa was the fight of the night, at least in my opinion, the way that they had gone at it, right? I mean, he may have lost, but man, drawing first blood like that, I think really says a lot in Myson Tybura and his particular trajectory of his career right now, right? He was able to withstand that, but also show that Tai Tuivasa is a tough fighter and a fighter that can cut you and hurt you at any given time. But as a result, this is what we got. We were able to get an exciting heavyweight fight, and then we got some controversy with Ryan Battle and Longase. Sorry if I mispronounce his name. You know, I'm not the best at pronouncing African names or anything like that. But Brian Battle did a great job. But once again, a no contest is a no contest. This is just what happens as a result. So what else is going on in the MMA world right now, right? Aside from the fight night that just happened. So Jose Aldo is coming back to fight in UFC Brazil at 301 in May 4th. So around May 4th, he's going to be coming back to the UFC to fight this guy named Martinez. Now, what do I think about it? I think they set this guy up to get a good win because Jose Aldo is a Brazilian hero, and nonetheless, as a result, this is what they're going to do, is give him an easy matchup that is stylistically going to be beneficial for him so that they can have a great show and have a happy ending as a result of that. What else is going on in the MMA world in the current moment of time right now? How about the heavyweight fight earlier tonight in boxing? At least in the boxing side, you had what's the guy's name? Joe Joyce taking on Cash Ali. Very exciting. Obviously, Joe Joyce is always the type of fighter that you know him to be. Very slow, very plotty, just doesn't have the best footwork. but got the job done in the 10th round against Cash Ali. For those of you that don't know anything about Cash Ali, this brother fought David Price, was beating him, and then out of nowhere bit him. So once again, kind of similar to what happened tonight at UFC, right? With Brian Battle and Longasay. Very similar in that fashion. Because obviously Brian Battle was winning the battle, but unfortunately, it was one of those situations, no pun intended. He won the war, but lost the battle. And what do I mean by that? Well, obviously, he had won based on the fact that
he has exposed
he won the war, right? Because he was winning the fight. But on paper, that's not what it says. What it says on paper is that you were in a no contest fight because you eye poked him. And as a result, that's just what you got. And how about the melee that they had going on, right? By the way, guys, don't forget to like and subscribe as you guys are watching this right now, as I give you guys a live coverage of the fight that just happened in UFC Fight Night, Bison Tybura and Tai Tuivasa. Where does Tai Tuivasa go from here? Well, I tell you what, this isn't one of those losses that you can look at and say, hey, you know what? Tai Tuivasa is done for. No. We're talking about two guys that are close in each other's ranks, 9 and 10. They're probably not going to move too far away from their rankings out of this particular fight. It would be in the same kind of similar fashion as, let's say, when you had Benoit Saint-Denis, if he was to, let's say, beat Dustin Poirier. Because Dustin Poirier is sitting at number 2, whereas with Benoit Saint-Denis, he was sitting at number 12. So if he was to beat Dustin Poirier, guess what? It would have made a great move up on his particular rankings, but that's not the case. So the fact that Dustin Poirier beat a number 2 guy, well, he stays at number 2. And the fact that Benoit Saint-Denis lost to a number 2 guy, and he's number 12, he stays at number 12. So not much move has changed, and this is literally what we have with Bison Tybura and Tai Tuivasa. However, what we do have is Bison Tybura being able to snap his losing streak. Whereas with Tai Tuivasa, I mean, he's coming off of some knockouts and some wins, obviously, one against Derek Lewis. But once again, it doesn't really change or move them that much. By the way, guys, don't forget to like and subscribe as you guys are checking this out. What do you think about Jose Aldo coming back to the UFC? I think that this is great news. Simply because Jose Aldo is a legend. Now, I want to talk about Jose Aldo for just a quick second. Let me take a look at the chat here. What do we have here? Hold on a second. Live chat. It says, what's up, fam? Rotten Zombie. What's up, Rotten Zombie? How you doing, man? Hope you enjoyed the fights tonight. Hope you're having a beautiful day. And my man says Team Aldo. So you're Team Aldo. You know what? I want to talk about Aldo for just a quick second before I go and break my fast for sundown. Because as you guys know, Muslims around the world are practicing Ramadan, where we don't eat from sunup till sundown. And, well, I just went to go get my iftar food, which is Arabic for breakfast. Because even though breakfast is in a conventional sense in the morning, breakfast for us in this particular setting is in sundown. So let me talk about Jose Aldo just after I just talked about the fights. And I'm going to go over the entire card in a separate video. But I just wanted to sort of keep and touch bases on this particular matter at hand with Tai Tuivasa's fight and also Brian Battle and the controversy that went along with that. But now let's talk about Jose Aldo. So Jose Aldo was an absolute legend. I think that his particular fight with Conor McGregor really tainted his legacy. And let me tell you why. For one, here's something you got to understand. Jose Aldo was at a long winning streak, defended the title after title defense, right? He went after Mark Hominick. He took on Chad Mendes twice, right? And then on top of that, all of a sudden now he comes and he fights Conor McGregor, 13-second knockout And then that was it. After that 13-second knockout, Jose Aldo came back, gave a good account of himself against Frankie Edgar in, by the way, UFC 200, which is interesting because guess what? We are on the verge of seeing UFC 300 sometime pretty soon. In fact, I think we are going to see a UFC 300 just right after Eid. So it's literally within the week of Eid after Ramadan ends. So, hey, it's a great present for a lot of the Muslim fight fans out there, right? You know, you're celebrating Ramadan, you're fasting all month, and you're looking forward to something to do. Obviously, Eid is going to fall sometime in that Wednesday of that fight week. And then in that particular weekend, guess what's going to come? UFC 300, right? How awesome is that? So it's going to be great. And Jose Aldo was part of UFC 200 after he lost to Conor McGregor. So it tainted his legacy. He was never able to get a title shot after that. And eventually, Conor McGregor, when he left the 145 division to pursue the Nate Diaz fight, to pursue the Eddie Alvarez fight, becoming a double champion, and then fighting Floyd Mayweather in the process, he then becomes the undisputed 145 champion once again through vacancy, by the way, which I believe was a vacant belt during UFC 200. Correct me if I'm wrong, just to make sure that my memory is intact in that particular setting, right? I believe that is when he won back his undisputed championship was against Frankie Edgar. So he went on to fight Max Holloway, and Max Holloway was basically the next man in line to take the crown away from Jose Aldo, and then in came the Max Holloway era, and then came Volkanovski, and now you have the lineage of Ilya Topuria. So that is the lineage that you have going on with the 145 division. By the way, a division that really Jose Aldo created. And here's something I want to tell you guys about that particular setting, as it looks like the sun is going down, and I probably got about a couple of minutes left before I can go and eat my food, break my fast. By the way, a division that really Jose Aldo created. And here's something I want to tell you guys about that particular setting, as it looks like the sun is going down, and I probably got about a couple of minutes left before I can go and eat my food, break my fast. Max is a beast. That's right, Rotten Zombie. He definitely was a beast. And many can argue and say that some of those fights he had won against Volkanovski. But again, we'll never know because the trajectory that Max went afterwards, obviously he went on to fight Arnold Allen, and now he's going to fight for the BMF belt at 155. And then Volkanovski lost to Ilya Topuria. So again, here we go. Sorry about that. So Jose Aldo in this particular time, right? He went on to box.
So where I had left off in that particular setting, I believe I was going to talk about that Jose Aldo was the inaugural champion of the UFC at the 145 division. For those of you that don't understand or are not up on the history of the UFC's belt lineage at 145, the UFC bought the organization WEC. And for those hardcore fans that remember WEC, it was an organization that featured a lot of the lightweight divisions, lighter weight divisions. For example, they had a 155 division. At some point, they had a 170 division, maybe even a 185 division. But then they scratched all that and decided they were going to focus at 155 and lower. And obviously, Anthony Pettis and Ben Henderson were the last fight for that particular organization where they fought for the 155 belt. So at 145, Jose Aldo was dominating the WEC. Eventually, when the UFC bought out WEC, they had just decided, you know what? We're going to crown you the inaugural 145 champion. And ever since then, the lineage of Jose Aldo, Conor McGregor, and then Jose Aldo again, and then Max Holloway, and then Volkanovski, and now here we are with Ilia Topuria. So that division, when it comes to its lineage, it's really not that long, at least not as long as the heavyweight championship. So it's important to know that. So that's one of the milestones in Jose Aldo's career in terms of him being a pioneer of some sort at the lighter weight divisions. So speaking of pioneer and whatnot, obviously the pioneer of the BMF belt, Jorge Masvidal, is going to rematch Nate Diaz, but he's going to rematch him in a boxing match. By the way, in Inglewood, California. And for those of you that don't know anything about Inglewood, California, ironically enough, it's a blood neighborhood, especially in that surrounding area where they're going to fight at the Kia Center. But that's ironic because guess how that fight ended between them in an MMA fight at, I believe it was UFC 244 back in 2019, I believe that fight had taken place, 2019. And Donald Trump attended that particular contest. It was one of the first contests that he had attended after his presidency. And then ever since then, he attended as a former president. UFC Miami, another UFC Miami, another UFC NYC, New York. Donald Trump was in all of those. So now both of these guys are out of MMA, at least out of their UFC contracts, or maybe they're not, because there's a freezing contract that goes when, let's say, you decide to retire, right? So if you decide to retire, you're going to somehow be frozen in your contract. In other words, if you're going to decide to go back and fight again, more than likely, you're going to have to go back and fight for the UFC. Not in all cases, right? I think this is one of the reasons why George St. Pierre sort of had an issue being able to go out and do different fighting events. For example, he was scheduled, or at least was signed or negotiating to box Oscar De La Hoya. George St. Pierre. Now, how amazing would that have been? I mean, it would have been a spectacle of some sort, but for some reason, the UFC is allowing game bred Jorge Masvidal to box Nate Diaz in his own promotion, ironically enough. So that's going to be interesting. That's going to be an interesting boxing match because obviously the elements of the kicks and grappling, long-term clinching is not going to be present. So they're going to fight under the Queensberry boxing rules. And I think that we're going to see a totally different dynamic of this fight. But also, I think that it's going to be a fight on its own, not so much of a lineage of, let's say, a rematch from an MMA fight. This is a completely different fight in and of itself, just like Jose Aldo when he boxed Jeremy Stevens. I think I was trying to explain that as the feed was going out while I was talking in that live feed that I was just showing you guys. So that's the reality of that particular fight. Also, I wonder why they didn't put Jose Aldo in the UFC 300 card. I think probably one of the big reasons why is because they wanted to fill up UFC Rio, which is 301, which made me wonder, well, how come you don't put Alex Pereira and Jamal Hill in that? A lot of people are not too happy about Jamal Hill and Alex Pereira as the main event. And I think the reason for that is because not so much of Alex Pereira, but so much of Jamal Hill. Look, as a hardcore fan, you can appreciate the work that Jamal Hill has produced, right? There's no doubt about it. The guy is a great fighter. If you're a hardcore fan, you can appreciate it. The problem is he's not a proven entity yet in terms of being a pay-per-view draw or a star or of some sort right now. Can he be in the future? Yes. But the problem is he's not in the current moment of time. And this is one of the reasons why. And then on top of that, people are imagining Marvel comic versus DC comic type of scenario in UFC 300. The standards that they are expecting out of UFC 300 is really, really high in that regard. So uh, let's take a look at some of the fights that had happened last night, right? Before we get into our main event of the night, which is Conor McGregor's contract issues with the UFC. Because obviously, I'm going to react to an MMA Joey video, which I thought was brilliantly done, which is why I'm going to give it the respect that it deserves and react to the video, but also share some quite interesting points in that matter of the content. So, but first, let's go on to take a look at some of the fights last night to sort of give a review on what had happened, right? So, obviously, Tai Tuivasa and Myson Tybura made a good account of himself. I sort of went over that in the live last night. Brian Battle and Ange Lusa, the issue that they had with the eye poke and becoming a no contest, feeling like he wasn't able to continue. As a result, Ovince St. Preux against Kennedy. Ovince St. Preux looked great. I mean, it's exactly how I would have. It's exactly how I predicted this fight was going to go. Right? If you think about it, I said that he was going to go in there, fight very methodical, very slow. There were no takedowns. It was a boxing match or a kickboxing match, to say the least, more like a boxing match. 51% strike percentage for Ovince St. Preux, 276 strikes. So he just basically outpointed Kennedy by being able to become just a little bit more of the active fighter. And speaking of active fighter, you take a look at this fight right here with Christian Rodriguez and Isaac Delargan. Now, Delargan had 7 out of 16 takedown attempts that he had in this fight, right? Usually in the older era, if you took down somebody about 7 times, that's literally enough for you to win. But again, judges have their own subjective opinion on certain matters at hand, and that's really the way that it is in a nutshell, if you really want to put it like that, right? The new criteria of scoring in the new era that we are currently dealing with. So no takedowns for Christian, yet he was able to win just based on his activity alone, right? So sometimes activity and volume in strikes really wins fights, and this is a clear example of that. So big ups to Christian for being able to pull that off. So on the next fight after that, you had, before that, obviously, Macy Chiasson getting a submission over Kianzad. Two takedowns successful, 1 submission attempt. Just that 1 submission alone chokes her out. Same thing with Gerald Mershad, gets a submission win. I mean, this guy has the most submissions in middleweight history, right? But yet he's sort of like considered a journeyman fighter, but again, a sleeper nonetheless. Brian Barberena sort of in that same trajectory, but the experience of Gerald Mershad really came into play in this. 3 out of 7 takedowns. He was just controlling the entire fight with just absolute sheer grappling dominance and was able to pull off the submission as a result. Which, by the way, I got to tell you, really made Khamzat's win against him a lot more valuable, right? Because oftentimes we like to criticize other people's resume of some sort, right? Until, let's say, that particular opponent in their resume goes on to do great things, and then that just ages well in the process. Other fights, Nathan Levy gets submitted by Mike Davis. I never would have expected this to go to a finish. Obviously, I picked Mike Davis to win this fight, but a submission nonetheless. Chelsea Chandler gets a win over Josanne Nunez. 2 out of 2 takedowns, wins the fight. And the volume of the strikes wins the fight for her with 56% striking percentage, 44% in the significant strikes, won her that fight. Philo gets a submission over Audie Osborne. I had gotten this one wrong, sort of underestimated the great record that Jafil had going on, and wins by a submission as a result. Joshua Kalibau loses this one just based off being out grappled, and Danny Silva was able to win this fight just as a result of that. The grappling, the volume in the strikes wasn't really there for Danny Silva, but again, this is why I say it's very subjective for judges in how they score these fights as a result. So Danny Silva wins that fight, deservingly so. And in one of the openers, the first 3 fights of the night, Jacqueline Amuran gets a submission over Corey McKenna. Now, this fight was a whole lot quicker than what I had expected. A whole lot quicker. I didn't expect this fight to end so quickly, but again, when you're dealing with a theater of the unknown, you just don't know what is going to happen or how sequences of a fight is going to go about. Next thing you know, they're standing on the feet, throwing punches, and next thing you know, a takedown happens or some sort of sequence in a fight brings them to the ground, where Jacqueline was able to get the submission win as a result of that. Thiago Moises gets a 3rd round knockout against Mitch Ramirez. Again, showed that he was the much more well-rounded fighter in this, was just dominating Mitch Ramirez on the grappling department, and obviously was able to finish it off in the 3rd round. And then the accuracy of his strikes, I think, was just the factor that overwhelmed Mitch Ramirez eventually. Now, moving on, Chad Aguilar gets a decision win in the first fight of the night. This fight right here, obviously, Chad didn't get any takedowns. This is a fight where the takedowns did not matter. I think the lack of striking on Charles Lapose's side, I think, really hindered him from winning. And, well, Chad got this win, and lackluster win at that, but a win is a win, and sometimes striking wins fights. And that's what you have in the process as a result. So now we're going to go and react to the Conor McGregor and Dana White fiasco via MMA Joey and his take on this matter at hand. I'm going to react to it. He reacted to it, but I'm basically...
I'm so excited to announce that local recordings
This is one of those news clips
are now available.
Conor McGregor or certain news that's not really being discussed in the most proper way right now, right? Because a lot of people have different theories on why Conor McGregor is not fighting in the current moment of time. But I think MMA Joey, in my opinion, really broke this down perfectly. But I have some thoughts and some opinions on this matter as well. So we're going to react to MMA Joey's Conor McGregor exposes Dana White's lies during movie tour.
McGregor has been going on a media tour for his new movie Roadhouse, and in this media tour where he's
by the way, Roadhouse is available on Prime Network. Surprisingly, not available for the movie theaters, right? I could probably make a separate video on that, but
interview after interview after interview, he has exposed Dana White for his multiple lies about why Conor McGregor has not returned.
But it's also important to understand that, of course, you're going to lie about certain things that may involve the UFC when you're Dana White. Why? Because you're going to protect their interest by any means necessary, and that's just what you do as a promoter and a CEO of the UFC.
To the UFC, the question that's been on everyone's mind, and especially on Michael Chandler's mind. So I want to make a video. We're going to look at some clips that we've already looked at in the past, but we're going to expose Dana White. We're going to go look at some kind of questions that he was prompted with a month ago, 2 months ago, and the way he responded about Conor right away with Dana White and Kevin Iole.
All right, let's skip to
these
this
next
right
two
here.
clips I'm going to show you. One from Kevin Iole, one from UFC 298 post-fight. Let's listen to this.
But you said it when you talked to Pat McAfee that Conor hopefully in the fall. Why is it taking so long for him? Is he injured? Like, can you explain what the scenario is? That why we don't have clarity? This has been almost 3 years since.
And also notice how MMA Joey brings up certain numbers here in terms of the days of inactivity with Chris Weidman as opposed to Conor McGregor. Very important points right here.
He's been hurt.
Well, you got to, first of all, he is coming back from one of the nastiest injuries you can come back from. How long was Anderson Silva out when he did it?
He's coming back from a nasty injury. Conor's been saying he's healthy for a while. Also, how long was Anderson Silva out? He was out for 399 days, December 28th, 2013 to January 31st, 2015. Conor McGregor is creeping up on 1,000 days since he's been out. So there you go. That's easily debunked.
1,000 days. Now, that's a lot of days, right? Considering, yes, it was a serious injury. But nonetheless, I think Conor McGregor is walking fine and healthy now. But again, a whole lot of smoke and mirrors going on here.
But we're going to get to Conor saying the truth about that soon.
How long was Chris Weidman out when he did it?
847 days.
You know, the guys who break that bone. So that's an issue right there. Number one. Number two is Conor McGregor doesn't need the fucking money.
Right.
So
this is something we've heard him say multiple times. We're going to see it in the next clip as well.
So there's a lot of deflection that goes on here, right? Whether he needs the money or not, I think is totally irrelevant based on the fact that the question is, why is he not coming back? It is obvious Conor McGregor still wants to fight, even if he has money. And again, I get that Khabib, he's also going to say that, yeah, Khabib doesn't want to come back. He has a lot of money. I don't think it's about the money of why Khabib doesn't want to come back. I could go into a whole entire video about, maybe I will. I'm probably going to make a video about why Khabib does not want to come back in the MMA space or in competition space. And a lot of it, by the way, has a lot to do with religious reasons. And it's a great time to do that, considering that it is Ramadan. And I can probably break down some religious factors as to why he's not going back. Right. And by the way, the answers may shock you. So be on the lookout for that. But for now.
Oh, he doesn't need money. What exactly does that mean, Dana? What does it mean he doesn't need money? We understand that he has plenty of money, but he said publicly that he wants to fight. So what's going on?
When you don't need the money, it's not as easy. I mean, Habib doesn't need the money. Habib retired.
Again, completely different circumstances, but as I said, I'm going to go into that. I'm going to give you reasons as to why that is. And the answers may shock you when I come out with that video.
So I said this in the original video I did about this. Thank God Kevin Iole actually pressed him a bit here. Shout out to him.
So would it be fair to say that okay.
And by the way, not enough people are really pressing Dana White on this matter at hand, as you could imagine why. If you are a media member that is constantly in the UFC shows or covering the sport in every event, you know what? You don't want to lose that press pass. So as a result of not wanting to lose that press pass, guess what you're going to do? You're going to play the line. You're going to play the role of being a person that's not objectifying the power at hand, right? In this case, the UFC. So more on this.
If Conor's not fighting now, is he healthy enough to fight if he chose to fight?
Well, I don't know that. Only Conor knows that.
Well, okay, that's what I'm at.
You don't have any idea about the health of the biggest star in your organization.
Yeah, and the reason why is because, again, there's a contract negotiation. I'm going to continue playing. You guys know exactly where this is going. A lot of where this is going is based on the fact that Conor McGregor wants out of his contract because he wants that Francis Ngannou money. More on this.
But we're going to get an answer from Conor in this video. We're going to take a look at an answer from Conor. Is he healthy or not?
Asking. So do you?
Conor's the one. I mean, these are questions for Conor McGregor, not me. Conor, I know he's training. I don't know what level of training he's doing. I don't know what level of kicking he's doing right now, I don't know any of that stuff.
So he knows nothing about Conor McGregor.
You talked to him about fighting. I mean, I'm sure you talked to him about fighting on 300. So you would have to have some idea, wouldn't you, Dana?
Yeah, but I need to know the guy's in a full camp and he's ready to go. And Conor McGregor has
I need to know he's in a full camp and ready to go. Remember that one as well. So injury and full camp.
a movie coming out. He's got businesses that he's built. It's
But to be honest with you, a lot of this is really irrelevant to his contract or his desire to wanting to be active as a UFC fighter, to be quite honest with you.
a completely different dynamic when you're dealing with a guy that has this kind of money.
So there you go. It's a completely different dynamic.
Which, again, it really has nothing to do with money, or I think it's really irrelevant. The motivation is really irrelevant. Look, here's something that I heard Chael Sonnen say the other day regarding Conor McGregor's losing motivation, right? I think motivation is irrelevant. And I agree with Chael on this because what he's trying to emphasize, it's all about discipline. Being a consummate professional in terms of doing what you don't want to do. That is what a professional does in a nutshell, right? So this isn't about motivation or desire of a certain monetary gain or anything like that. This is simply all about one thing: discipline. Does he have the discipline? That depends. Every fighter has a different discipline threshold depending on what part of the year they are in competition mode or resting mode or off-season mode, and all of these different variations.
He has money. He has an injury. I need to know that he's in a full camp before I book him for a fight that I've been promoting for a while now, basically, which is just craziness. Now, this next exchange is at UFC 298 post-fight.
So, again, MMA Joey made a great point on that, right? They've been promoting this fight for a very long time. By the way, I'm going to put this in context, how long this fight has been, right? It has been already 2 Ramadans since Conor McGregor has last fought. And how I know this, because I made a video about Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler while I was in last Ramadan. And now it's another Ramadan, just to kind of put that in perspective.
Fight presser. This was one of my favorite exchanges with Dana White ever in the history of a post-fight press conference, because this media member actually...
And by the way, here's something that I think is really interesting to point out. Not a lot of people really go out there and press Dana White on certain topics and issues at hand, right? For good reason. But again, we're going to see the reason as to why a lot of people don't press him. And this particular media member right here has pressed him on this issue. And you're going to see what is what with that.
Presses Dana hard, and I've showed this in a previous video as well, but the same arguments from Dana White again and again and again.
With regard to Conor McGregor, what is the holdup with his return?
Great question.
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, the Ultimate Fighter was over back in August, and I can't imagine the plan was for him to be out as long as he's been.
Well, look how pissed Dana is from that question in general, and he hates this media member. I think this was like a local media member in California.
Exactly. When you bring non-MMA people who, by the way, are only going to be in this event one time, right? Or at least next time when they come back to this particular venue, they don't really care. A lot of these guys are on the road with Dana White, and as a result, they don't want to lose that press pass, so they're not going to try to press the issue on the powers that be.
Or wherever 298 was, I believe. Yeah, it was in California at the Honda Center. Because the regular MMA media that travels with Dana, they would have never had the guts to press him on this.
Well, first problem was that he broke that shin bone. He was recovering from that.
So then again, the injury, spouts the injury excuse yet again, even though...
Again, yeah, the injury will continuously be the excuse as a deflection every time Dana White is being pressed on that particular issue at hand. Simply because he has no answer or can't give you the real answer, which, again, falls into the contract negotiations of the fact that he has 2 fights left and the UFC wants to leverage him as a result without giving Conor McGregor any leverage. Again, Conor McGregor is in a very unique case that I think only one other person can relate to, and that's Francis Ngannou.
Been almost what? It's going on 3 years. It was in June or July of 2021. July 2021.
It's here. It's here. It's here. Oh my God. Oh my God.
It's March of 2024.
That was one of the reasons we had it. And the other problem is he's fucking rich.
And how does that present?
By the way,
Again, irrelevant. Irrelevant if he's rich. Do you know how many rich people are in MMA as active fighters? A lot of people are rich. Israel Adesanya is rich, maybe not as rich as Conor McGregor. John Jones is rich, maybe not as rich as Conor McGregor. A whole lot of people are rich in MMA. A lot of people have made, great money in MMA. I think that's very irrelevant, especially with this particular topic at hand.
listen to the other MMA media, probably the normal guys that go there and are scared of Dana. They're cackling. Oh, Dana, you're so funny.
An issue to you with negotiations?
What do you mean?
Well, I'll ask, does Conor McGregor...
Conor McGregor doesn't need money.
So are we at a point here where Conor McGregor may never fight for the UFC? Can you say that?
By the way, is Dana on coke? Look at the way he's just constantly licking his lips. I guess he just has a dry mouth. But
completely irrelevant on the part of MMA Joey, but either way, I wouldn't put it past Dana.
I don't understand. It's one or the other. What Dana does here is gish gallop. He throws out a million different reasons why Conor's not fighting.
It's called deflection, but yeah.
But if he's injured, it would have nothing to do with the money. If it's a money issue, okay, he could be injured, but why would you be discussing, his money if it's an injury issue? It just makes no sense.
If you had shitloads of money, would you be sitting here right now asking me this fucking question?
No.
No, you would not. That just answered your question.
So you're saying that if a media member has a ton of money that doesn't have to work for an MMA outlet, that you're saying that they're not going to sit... More than likely, I think you got a point there. But what if you are a hardcore fan and you enjoy what you do? You could be a billionaire, but you want a press pass to come to UFC. And, once again, irrelevant. Deflection. That's what you do in deflection. When you deflect something, it's just what you do, right? He has no real answer. He's trying to hide something. It's quite obvious.
So he thinks he's going to deflect here, but he doesn't. This media member keeps pressing him.
Well, I answered no. So you're saying there's a chance that Conor McGregor will not fight again for the UFC?
I don't know. Conor McGregor's got a lot of money. And
again, throw in the has a lot of money card. Why is that relevant?
Anytime we get Conor, we'll be happy to, be thrilled when he comes and fights. But
what he's really trying to say here is, yes, great that Conor comes and fights for us, but also at the same time, it's completely irrelevant if he doesn't want to. In other words, they don't need him, but it's great when he's there, is what he's basically trying to say here.
Imagine hearing this answer. This is February 17th, so it's probably February 18th because it's probably past midnight at this point. And Michael Chandler said on January 4th, he's getting ready to leave his family in a couple weeks for the Conor McGregor training camp, pre-camp. Imagine hearing that answer from Dana White. But again, we're going to break this down more here in a second.
Look, again, Dana White is trying to hide the truth from you, because why would he not hide the truth from you? He needs to hide the truth because... Let's just be honest about it, right? He doesn't want to tell the fans and people that Dana White has contract issues with Conor McGregor, and they want to have the most amount of leverage in order to prevent him from making more money elsewhere and using his fame and clout that he got out of the UFC just to make money elsewhere, like Francis Ngannou did. And an even bigger scale, because let's just be honest, obviously Conor McGregor is a bigger star than Francis Ngannou, so you could imagine what type of money the Saudis are willing to give him.
Money complicates a lot of things. He just filmed a movie. He's got to do the press for the movie, and he's got obligations with that. And he does want to fight this year, but we'll see what happens.
Again, has a movie, has too much money, has an injury.
Part of the issue that Conor...
That's the only issue.
Is there an issue?
There's no other issue.
Look, he doesn't even want him to get the question out. I covered this before. Doesn't.
There's no other issue other than a sunset clause, other than he has 2 fights left in his contract and he wants to fight it out. Yeah, there's no other issue. So you're saying the injury is an issue. You're saying that the movie is an issue in and of itself. But again, there's more to it than that. And I understand you are the UFC. You don't need to tell everybody everything about your business and what you do behind closed doors. But at the same time, people can see right through it and they're going to call you out on it regardless.
Doesn't even want him to get the question out.
That's it.
Wanting to re-sign him to a longer
No.
contract.
Conor McGregor has probably been one of the best business partners we've ever had. Doing business with Conor is getting Conor to show up to shit on time is a problem. But Conor, as far as the business goes, for a guy, everybody talks about how Conor used to be on the dole and all this stuff. For a guy that was on the dole, Conor McGregor is a very good businessman. And Conor McGregor has always been a great partner to us.
So I don't understand how those two things go together. Oh, he's got too much money. That's why we haven't done business. But he's really easy to do business with. Those two things don't go together. They don't go together at all. So again, just a million.
Well, okay. So here's the thing about that, right? He's a great business partner. He's great to do business with. All of these things are true. But again, it's just a smoking mirror to try to distract you from what's really going on behind the scenes.
Excuses.
There's never any hanging out and haggling for money or, you pay me more money. Conor McGregor has never done anything even remotely close to that. It's the exact opposite.
I'm something of a magician, inventor, and chocolate maker.
Oh, what is that?
So he's never asked for money, ever. That makes no sense. There's been public negotiations between Conor and the UFC before, but Conor's never asked for a raise in the history of his connection to the UFC. That's what Dana's.
Well, of course he's going to say that because, once again, people don't want to reveal what type of negotiations they have behind closed doors. Dana White has said plenty of times before that a lot of fighters don't want to tell other people what they make because guess what? They don't want people hounding them in their personal lives about money, right? That's why a lot of fighters would rather say that they're broke than say that they're balling, unless, of course, you have one of these personalities where you're a braggadocious type of person.
Saying here,
when it's time to dig in and get to work and make money, he's probably the most incredible partner we've ever had, to be honest with you.
Okay, this is crazy. When it's time to
yeah, incredible for you considering that he does bring in a lot of money, and then on top of that, you take literally a lot of money from Conor McGregor. I've said this over and over again, right? Yes, Conor McGregor is the highest paid fighter of all time, but he's also the highest robbed fighter of all time as a result of that. That's really important to know, by the way. Let me say that again. Conor McGregor is the highest paid fighter of all time, which ultimately in the UFC's pay structure makes him the most robbed fighter of all time. You're talking about 70 million from the Floyd Mayweather fight. That's an estimation, right? But then 70 million of that, 40 million of that went to the UFC and 30 went to him. Still, it's great money, better than everybody else that's in the UFC. But that also is a reason why he is the most robbed fighter of all time.
dig in and make money and go to work. Well, it was since February of last year when you announced The Ultimate Fighter and sold wolf tickets to people who watched that season. I mean, I shame on you if you did watch it, but I feel bad for you as well.
All right, and I have one last question with regard to Wanderlei Silva.
Okay, so there we go. That's the entire post-fight. Okay, now you've heard those same arguments from Dana White, injury, too much money, blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, Conor McGregor's been begging to fight nonstop, and I've had a theory.
All right, so then obviously MMA Joey goes into the movie tour that Conor McGregor did, and these are some things that Conor McGregor had to say as a result of that.
Context, and this is only a very short clip. This is Conor asked, I think you'll be busy June 29th, because Conor came out and said, I'm fighting June 29th. Dana White came out and shot that down. And watch the way Conor reacts to this.
And I think you're going to be busy towards the end of June.
I'm hoping to get it. You can tell Hunter, your man, that this new.
Look at that. I'm hoping. Tell Hunter.
Yeah, I'm hoping, right? So I got to tell you, right? The language on that when he says, I'm hoping, that means there's no definitive answer. So, in other words, let's say if you plan a vacation of a certain date, let's say you already had it booked. So, right now it is March. Let's say you have a vacation booked for April. You're not saying, well, I'm hoping to go. The language is, I'm going to this vacation spot in April because I already have it signed, sealed, and delivered. I have my plane ticket. I have my hotel booked. I have the car rentals that I'm going to use when I get to that place. It's a definitive language that I'm expressing to you right now. This is not a definitive language by Conor McGregor, and with good reason.
Hunter Campbell is the UFC's lawyer, who's like Dana's right-hand man, who was kind of installed by WME, who negotiates some kind.
And once again, what they're going to go into right here are the contract negotiations that Conor McGregor is facing. So what's going on is that he has 2 fights left. He doesn't want to, I think, I'm not saying that he doesn't want to fight in the UFC, but you got to think to yourself, right? There's Manny Pacquiao that the Saudis are willing to offer you. The Saudis are willing to offer you Manny Pacquiao. And as a result of that, you're going to make more money. And I'm going to just play this right here just so you can understand the context.
Contract, especially for tough to re-sign fighters.
Okay, in there to get the ball rolling. You know, I've got this workload here, a lot of press, a lot of partying at St. Patrick's, and after that, I'm in fight camp. I got my team here. We're ready to go.
So there you hear him basically begging Hunter Campbell, let's get a fight going. I hope to be back soon. Okay. Now this next clip, and again, I showed this in the video from the other day, but this is just a very short clip.
Look, here's another thing I think people really need to understand about Conor McGregor as well, right? Do you think that maybe, and again, this is all speculatory. I need people to understand something here, right? Neither me, MMA Joey, or any MMA content out there, MMA Guru or Tracy Lucas, or any of these people that are big in the MMA space, including Dan Hardy and including Ariel Helwani, they don't know anything. We don't know anything. All we are doing is simply speculating, but guess what? That speculation in and of itself is what makes this absolutely entertaining, because we can run wild with our imaginations, but at the same time, we can also give you some plausible theories. Now, here's one plausible theory that I have. Is it possible that Conor McGregor is just really over the hill, and the UFC knows this, and perhaps maybe they understand that throwing him into a fight with Michael Chandler may not be as lucrative as it is? Also, you also got to take into consideration, what if Conor McGregor is just not the star that he once was? What if he's not going to produce, let's say, the type of pay-per-view numbers that he did with Khabib, right? The type of pay-per-view numbers that he did with Eddie Alvarez, and maybe even the type of pay-per-view numbers, surprisingly, that he did with Donald Cerrone. He did great numbers with Dustin Poirier. But what if the UFC has a media team behind him? And by the way, for somebody that understands public relations, for somebody that understands media, and somebody who's been in that particular field, I can tell you that a lot of these companies, such as the UFC, the NFL, the NHL, the NBA, a lot of these people have media analysts to take a look at numbers, to take a look at what is trending, to take a look at who is hot and who is not. What if the type of reading that they're getting behind the war room spells something to the extent of, well, you know what? Conor McGregor is no longer a big star, and the projection that we have for this matter at hand, if we were to throw him in a pay-per-view with Michael Chandler, would not do great numbers. Maybe it's a combination of the fact that Michael Chandler is not the biggest star in the world himself, only to the hardcore MMA space. And perhaps maybe Conor McGregor is just on a decline, not only on his physical limits as a UFC fighter and an elite athlete, but also his limits as the star that he once was. Because you got to think about it. Do you honestly think that there is still a high level of interest for Conor McGregor out there? And I'm only speculating because, again, as I've told you guys earlier, all of this is just pure speculation. We don't know. We can only guess. And by the way, as MMA content creators, it's great for us to create these speculations because we can run wild with our imaginations and give you some entertaining content as a result of it. But in reality, we really don't know. But we have these interviews. We have people out there analyzing behind the scenes. We have people in YouTube and social media that take a look at every single bits and pieces that they could find to try to get an answer. And that is literally what we're doing right now.
He talks about training camps. Remember, Dana said, oh, I got to make sure he's in camp and make sure he's healthy and blah, blah, blah. Listen to this.
You know, I'm wrapping up this tour. I've got the St. Patrick's Day festivities going, and then I'm going to get back and regroup. I'm going to test myself physical-wise on the treadmill and do the RAM test and go about the McGregor fast away and get myself right back. I had a camp in Cannes, the south of France. I had a camp in Dubai at World Champions training with me where I was hoping for a December date, then a January date, and then it keeps getting pushed back. Then I lose interest and stop training for a while.
You know, I got to tell you what Chael Sonnen said the other day that really caught my ears. He said something to the effect of he's training in all these different places, Dubai, France, and all that, right? So he mentioned something to the effect, well, who is he training with? Are these guys the type of guys that owe him anything? Hey, you came and helped me in the last camp so great. I'm going to come and help you in the process. And then on top of that, what type of work are you really getting out of people that you've never really trained with? Or is he bringing in training partners to go and travel with him? Again, we don't know. These things are speculations. I'm not here to tell you that I know everything about every little bits and pieces. I'm here just like you as a fan, as an observer of the sport, to try and analyze what is the truth of this matter at hand. And a lot of content creators out there have such definitive languages on what it is that they think they know, but really they don't know. And it's just pure speculation. And you're getting the most inaccurate result as what we can see with a lot of people out there.
There you go. So we had 2 fight camps. Dana White said he's injured. Dana White says he doesn't want to fight because of money. Dana White says, oh, I have to make sure he's in camp. There you hear all those things.
Okay, so this is interesting, right? What MMA Joey there just said. He said, I have to make sure that he's in camp. So, once again, with all the speculations that we have, because I'm not putting definitive languages here for you guys to take in and make of that as you will and make your own judgment. He said Dana wants to make sure that he's in camp. So you got to ask yourself, right? Is the UFC's motivation perhaps to try to sort of delay his process because they feel that he's not really in a serious training camp and he could get seriously hurt in the process of engaging in this fight with Michael Chandler, who, by the way, really does nothing but train all day, stays in the same location in his home state, and doesn't go off the path whether he wins or loses, right? He is constantly consistent in what he does, which, by the way, could be very dangerous for Conor McGregor in the process. And maybe perhaps it would just do nothing but really cost them their biggest star, and then once again give him an even worse injury than he had before.
Things right there. And Conor McGregor easily debunks him in this media tour. Now, this most recent clip that probably a lot of people haven't seen yet is Conor McGregor again doing another Roadhouse promotional interview. And he finally confirms what's going on and what I've been saying for a while. In case you haven't been following it, and I'm sorry if you guys have watched a lot of these videos and already know what I'm about to say.
So yeah, Conor McGregor may reveal what we know or what we think we know or what he thinks he knows here. But once again, you also have to understand there's speculation, but then there's also trying to hide certain aspects of what you think you know. Or I'm sorry, is you trying to hide certain aspects of what they really know is going on behind the scenes.
I've been saying it for a while. It's contract issues with the UFC and Conor McGregor. The UFC doesn't like when high-profile fighters fight out their contracts.
I chose St. George's University School of Medicine because at the time that I wanted to go into,
they get down to two, three fights left.
So to be fair, I think that what MMA Joey is about to go on here, I think could probably be the most plausible reason that you could find here. See what I'm talking about.
They like to re-sign them to a long-term deal because they don't want them fighting out their contract because then they have leverage. This is what happened with Francis Ngannou. They iced Francis Ngannou because Francis Ngannou was trying to fight out his deal. That's why Dana White and a lot of fans are saying Ngannou.
And just like Francis Ngannou, Conor McGregor wants that Saudi money to box Manny Pacquiao. Just like Francis Ngannou, he took on the best boxer in the world, only to take on the second best boxer of all time in that era in Manny Pacquiao, which is his 100% desire and motivation to do so.
Ngannou was inactive. He was asking for fights. The UFC was icing him. The whole thing about we have to offer these guys 3 fights a year for their deal, that's just not true, because even if they don't offer them that, taking the UFC to court would essentially ruin your career because you'd be tied up in litigation for literally years. So Conor has
again, and that is the leverage that the UFC has going on, right? Because yes, it is common knowledge that the UFC says that once you are signed to the UFC, that they're supposed to offer you 3 fights a year. But if they don't offer that to you under that contract, they can really tie you up in a court because, once again, it's a strategy. They're going to bleed you out, right? You don't have enough money or resources the way that they do to fight these cases, and that's really what it comes down to. My man D Brown here says, hi, all. I think Conor also has promotional obligations for his movie leading up to the premiere. It would affect his training camp. So this is also true, right? I think a lot of people who are also in the emotional side of, let's say, oh, well, why isn't Conor coming to fight or this and that? And then creating all these different speculations. I think that they're not looking at that particular instance. Because again, what I've said earlier, D Brown, if you weren't here earlier, I was saying that a lot of people who have these speculations, MMA content creators, media members, they sort of have this definitive language as to say, well, it's because of this reason, it's because of that. And I'm not here to present to you that I have one specific answer as to why all of these things are going on. I'm giving you variations and different type of nuances that are going on behind the scenes so that you can give yourself the best judgment possible and the best conclusion to your own mind.
2 fights left on his contract, which I've said in previous videos. He wants to fight out his contract and have leverage over the UFC and potentially go box in Saudi Arabia. If Francis Ngannou's getting 10 million, if Francis Ngannou's...
And that right there is also highly plausible. Because if you think about it, if Conor McGregor only has 2 fights left in his contract, and by the way, that is absolute public information out there. You could pull that up. That is absolutely true, right? Is he trying to fight out this contract? Yes, but here's the thing. You're talking about 2 fights. So once you're done with Michael Chandler, then you have to do another one, and then you have to wait even longer to get that boxing match in Saudi Arabia in the process.
He's getting 20 million. Conor McGregor's thinking, what can I get? And also, even though, I'm not saying he's going to win against a Manny Pacquiao or whatever.
D Brown says a previous comment would apply to this upcoming movie and UFC. That in and of itself would be the compounding of his efforts, as well as working against perhaps both endeavors. So let's see. Let's try to analyze this. This is a very good comment. Previous comment would apply to his upcoming movie and the UFC. Okay, so in other words, the training camp would affect the movie premiere, and the movie premiere would affect the training camp. So that's where I'm gathering with this. And then the second part is that in and of itself would be compounding his efforts. So in other words, what you're saying is that it would just leave him to be a very busy man to where he can't really decompartmentalize one particular venture or project to the other. In other words, stretching him out in terms of his concentration and his efforts in what he's doing. Yes, okay. As well as work against perhaps both endeavors. Yes. So all of this is true. And then on top of that, the desire of him wanting to box Manny Pacquiao and the big money that the Saudis are offering him. Because guess what? The UFC knows that the Saudis are out there prowling. Even though the Saudis are willing to work with the UFC, and they're actually doing a show with the UFC in June. So, you know what? Maybe, just maybe, the fight with Michael Chandler and Conor McGregor are going to take place in the Saudi Arabia card. Or maybe not, but we'll see.
But Conor looks at boxing. He's like, well, that's easier than fighting Chandler in the UFC. That's easier than fighting Justin Gaethje or whoever.
I don't know about that. Now, listen, I got to tell you that when it comes to Manny Pacquiao, I don't think that's an easier fight. Now, I think what MMA Joey's trying to say is that boxing is easier. I could tell you that, yes, maybe boxing is easier in a sense where you're not having to exert a certain amount of anaerobic effort, right? Because when you're boxing, you're pushing an aerobic effort, right? You're only using your hands, you're using your feet to move, and that's it. You're not throwing kicks, which, by the way, if you're not experienced at it, or even if you are the most experienced Muay Thai fighter or kickboxer, it's still very tiring to throw 100 kicks in a fight, right? And also the grappling aspect. I think what he's trying to say is that boxing is easier, but Manny Pacquiao, with any stretch of the imagination, is not an easy outing for anybody, period. So,
whoever else in the UFC, I'd rather go box.
And I think that Michael Chandler is an easier fight for Conor McGregor in MMA as opposed to Conor McGregor boxing Manny Pacquiao in boxing.
Pay me $50 million. The UFC's not paying him $50 million. The UFC's paying him like 10, 15, maybe 20 million. I don't know what his exact purse is. But the point is, I've been saying for a while, Conor McGregor wants to fight out his deal. And he says it right here. He's like, I got 2 fights left on my deal, and we're in negotiations because the UFC's trying to re-sign him to a long-term deal. Listen to this.
I'm looking forward to getting back and regressing, you know.
By the way, regressing, that I think he misspoke there.
Resetting and recalibrating and mapping my return to the octagon. I'm eager for that, you know.
I think what he meant was progressing, but yeah, I agree with MMA Joey there where he sort of misspoke.
We're in the first quarter of 2020.
Also, I think the fact that he sort of misspoke in that sort of really tells you that he's under a lot of pressure with these two projects that he has going on, right? Obviously, even though he's not signed to fight anybody, he still has to be in training camp to get ready for the next upcoming fight, whether that would be Michael Chandler or whatever else the UFC may offer him, while also doing these movie tours and promotions for the particular movie. There's a lot of stress that is going on in Conor McGregor's life right now. And I got to tell you guys, doing a movie, I think, is one of the biggest killers for fighters. Simply because you have to choose one or the other, right? You're either going to be a top-level UFC fighter or you're going to be a movie star. And quite frankly, it's quite difficult to do both.
24.
Yeah.
There's still a good chunk of the year left.
So there he's saying, I want to fight this year. Dana's saying, oh, he's injured. Dana's saying he has too much money. Conor's been saying for a while, you're keeping me from my way of living. I want to fight. Give me a date. There's another clip.
So I understand that a lot of people out there say something to the effect, well, okay, there's all these obligations going on, like my man D Brown here had just mentioned, right? Leading up to the premiere, affecting his training camp. All of this is true. However, I think there's also the other aspect of motivation, the other aspects of a whole lot of other things, right? Let's go back to what he just said here for a second.
Conor's been saying for a while, you're keeping me from my way of living. I want to fight. Give me a date. There's another.
Yeah. So he was also saying that they're keeping him from making a living, right? Because once again, if you are in a situation where you can be leveraged or be put in a lawsuit, and as a company or as an entity, one of the things that you have to do is sort of prolong that process. This is a strategy that a lot of lawyers use in order to, let's say, get themselves out of a certain situation or get themselves out of a litigation or some sort of contract disputes. You wait it out, right? That is a strategy. And a lot of top negotiators can tell you that, right? They don't rush into things. They sort of wait things out. They sort of bleed you out if they have to, and all of these processes in between.
Another clip where he's like, give me a date. But listen to what he has to say also, the negotiations.
I've got 2 fights left on my contract. Negotiations are ongoing.
So once again, that right there is where the public information. Hold on, let's. Yes, shout outs to
when the
StreamYard.
promotional work of the movie comes to an end, when the St. Patrick.
Okay, so what I was just saying was that yes, he just mentioned right there he has 2 fights left in his contract. So that right there in and of itself is pure public information to the highest order right there, right? He said it. You can look it up. There's documents on that particular matter at hand. So this is not a lie. And again, if you really want to investigate this, right, take every little bits and pieces of information. Take a look at what is the truth, what is not, what is exaggeration, and what is not, what is plausible and what is impossible in terms of what is going on. And then you can sort of draw a conclusion. But then again, even with all that information that you can piece together, you never know.
Patrick's Day festivities come to an end.
Yeah.
You know, it's isolation.
Priorities, Conor, I like
it's
it.
isolation and it's focus. And
so there you
go. Okay, so I'm glad that he mentioned this, right? So he mentioned St. Patrick's Day, which, by the way, consists of what? A whole lot of heavy drinking, a whole lot of partying, and there's nothing locking you down when it comes to something like that, right? Like you're not going to go and focus on training camp while you're partying or this and that. So what he's trying to say is, I just want to party one time, get it out of my system, and then lock myself down to a real strict camp if he hasn't already or has done it multiple times after his injury and things of that nature. So
here, negotiations are ongoing, and I have 2 fights left on my contract. Conor McGregor is trying to fight out his deal. That is why Dana White is sitting him on the sidelines. Because if it was up to Conor, he would have fought in December and then maybe fought in like March or April or maybe May, and then he's out of his UFC contract. Now
and look, here's the thing, right? That's not impossible to believe. And let me tell you why. If you know anything about Conor McGregor's career trajectory, this guy fought consistently in the beginning of his career, fight after fight after fight. Also, he never turned down fights. Chad Mendes, he never turned down fights, right? Even though it was originally supposed to be Jose Aldo for the first time. Obviously, Jose Aldo got injured and Chad Mendes came in. After Chad Mendes came in, he beat Chad Mendes and then went on to fight Jose Aldo in the process. After Jose Aldo, he then went on just a few months later to fight, or was at least scheduled to fight RDA, who was a 155 champion at the time. But instead, RDA gets injured. Who comes in? Nate Diaz. He fights Nate Diaz. He loses on that March of 2016, only to come back in August and fight in a rematch against Nate Diaz. And then after that fight in August of 2016, he comes back November of that same year and beats Eddie Alvarez, and then goes on and fights Floyd Mayweather. And then after that, that's when his activity started. So prior to that, yes, it is not impossible, especially if Conor is at his best. And I got to tell you, the reason why he was able to take a lot of these fights was because back then he truly believed in himself, and he knew that he was able, he had the capability of beating these guys. Now, perhaps maybe he feels the same way. Maybe there's a part of delusionality that comes into believing that he can still compete with a lot of these guys, or maybe he still can. And maybe Dustin Poirier is just that good that we realize that perhaps maybe Conor McGregor was taking on the real number 2 guy in the world, which is what Dustin Poirier is now. And maybe he can do great against other people. Look at the way that he smoked Donald Cerrone. Yes, we understand that Donald Cerrone gets smoked by everybody, but once again, he's also kind of shown that because he was able to smoke him in that matter, he was elite and focused and all of that.
There's more stipulations to that contract, the exclusive negotiating period and the rights to match, but he would have been a lot further along to getting out of that restrictive contract. And also, most likely Conor McGregor has the sunset.
And yes, here's the thing. The UFC has one of the most strictest contracts in all of combat sports, if not all of sports, period, right? And MMA Joey is going to go into this sunset clause that he's about to talk about, which further complicates things because I think Conor McGregor's plan was this. I'm going to fight multiple times, fight out the two fight contracts, and then after he fights those out, then he can leave his contract with the UFC, sort of do what Nate Diaz did, and sort of do what Jose Aldo did, where he left, went and boxed elsewhere, and then came back. And by the way, in the beginning of this stream, I had emphasized and mentioned about Jose Aldo's boxing endeavors, only to come back to the UFC and UFC 301 in Rio de Janeiro coming this May.
Clause built into his contract that was added after 2017 because of the antitrust lawsuit. They've since modified it to make it a little bit more restrictive. But basically, whenever Conor signed his last deal, 5 years from that date, he can leave the UFC, just like Francis Ngannou did when the UFC claimed that they cut him. So essentially, Conor McGregor is butting heads with the UFC and Dana White. He either is looking to get more money than they're willing to offer him for a long-term deal. But I think at the end of the day, I think Conor McGregor wants to follow the lead of a Francis Ngannou.
Yes, he certainly does. Because I got to tell you, the reason why he wants to follow the lead of Francis Ngannou is really just simple to the fact that Francis Ngannou has made the most money that he's ever made by a long mile, okay? And he feels that he can do the same thing considering that he's a bigger star.
And head to Saudi Arabia and box for much more money than the UFC is willing to give him to fight absolute killers like Michael Chandler in the UFC. I do think if they come to an agreement, I think most likely he will not fight Michael Chandler. He may, but I think if they come to an agreement, I think.
And by the way, I got to tell you, the biggest victim out of all this is Michael Chandler, right? Michael Chandler is not getting any younger. He's way older than Conor McGregor. Michael Chandler is right around my age at 38 years old. And then on top of that, by the time that this fight happens, he'll probably be 39, close to 40. And again, it's not helping his case. He wants the Conor McGregor fight because he will probably make more money out of the Conor McGregor fight than he would if he was to fight anyone else. But then again, maybe he should just go and fight other people, right? I'm going to go into that in a second after we finish this MMA Joey video. I'm going to go into why I think Michael Chandler should go fight other people. And a lot of that also has to deal with contract negotiations as well.
I think they're going to give Conor McGregor more of a softball return. Maybe the dead body of Tony Ferguson. Maybe somebody else that's much more manageable.
And by the way, that's not implausible to believe that Conor McGregor would desire someone like Tony Ferguson, right? There's beef going on there. Tony Ferguson is on a decline. And on top of that, if you look at the past text messages that Conor McGregor and Dana White had been revealed a couple of months ago or about a year ago or so, Conor McGregor mentions he wanted to fight Diego Sanchez in this text. And what did Dana White say in the process when Conor McGregor said he wanted to fight Diego Sanchez? He said, no commission is going to allow that. That would be a way of losing my promoter's license. In Dana's exact words, obviously I'm paraphrasing.
Than Michael Chandler.
So that means it's not impossible for him to wanting to fight Tony Ferguson as a softball, as MMA Joey here is mentioning.
That Michael Chandler, is a super hard fight. He's not an Oliveira. He's not a Makhachev. He's not a Justin Gaethje, but Chandler's in the gym 24/7. Meanwhile, Conor's out at the club drinking.
Which is why, yes, this is a very difficult fight for Conor McGregor regardless. And the reason why this is a difficult fight for Conor McGregor, even though, as MMA Joey here mentioned, he's not, Michael Chandler is not in the level of Makhachev. He's not in the level of Dustin Poirier and all these top lightweights. He's still tough enough to beat Conor McGregor in the current state that he's in. Now, look, here's this constant thing that a lot of people are saying that I really want to challenge, right? They say that, well, Conor McGregor is not really in the gym. He's not really training. Well, how do you know? How do you know that? But they also cite and say something to the effect of, well, Conor McGregor looks like he's getting older or this and that. Look, I understand that. People vary. And what I mean by people vary in terms of, how old they look at a certain age. Some people look very young, even when, let's say, they reach a certain age. And then some people look even older when they are in their teenage years, right? I know some people that I went to high school with that looked like they were already in their 30s by the time they were a senior in high school. And then it just got even worse as time went on. I know guys right now that are 40, 50 years old that look like they're my age. And that's just the reality of it. I'm 38 years old, and different people have different speculations of what my age would be, right? So again, it varies, and I wouldn't put too much stock into that. But this idea to say that Conor McGregor isn't training, how do you know? Why? Because he's not training with top UFC fighters. That's true, but when has he ever really fought in a training camp? When has he ever really got prepared for a fight with other elite UFC fighters or other elite boxers or anything like that? It seems like a pretty consistent basis that he sticks to a certain team, he sticks to a certain group of coaches, and he sticks to a certain group of training partners, and with good reason. I think there's two philosophies in training camps, which I'm going to go off the tangent on this particular subject right now, but I think it's important and worth mentioning. There's the school of thought in a training camp where you have to train with the best guys in the world, right? Iron sharpens iron. But the downside of this is that when you're in a situation of iron sharpens iron, you're sort of in a situation where these particular iron men could really rust you up, right? That's a reality. And again, I got to tell you, somebody who's trained in Team Alpha Male out here in Sacramento, we've brought in some of the best fighters in the world out here, right? But here's the problem with that, right? Sometimes there's a lot of injuries that are going on. I forgot this guy's name, but I would say about almost a decade ago, there was a guy in Team Alpha Male that had suffered a serious injury to where he got crippled, right? And this is a result of being in there training with some of the best guys in the world, right? So you got to think to yourself, like, is it really safe for you to train with the best guys in the world all the time? Okay, so that's the one school of thought. It's great. Yes, you get a feel of what true competition is, and you're always staying sharp. That is the upside, but the downside is the possible injuries that you get training with these killers, as opposed to, let's say, Conor McGregor, who goes out there and trains with, let's say, guys that are not in a UFC level, maybe guys that are just in a Bellator level, such as James Gallagher or Ward, or who else, some of the known training partners of Conor McGregor, Paddy Houlihan, who, by the way, was a 125er. So again, not really the most highly elite athletes in terms and standards of what you see other fighters do. But who knows, man? Maybe that's the reason why he is able to perform the way that he does. Maybe some guys thrive off of knowing that, hey, you know what? I beat up these guys in training camp. I'm going to do the same thing even if I go up there and fight elite athletes. But again, this is just pure speculation. I don't know, but I'm giving you guys an objective take and a varying ideas in terms of how different people train and how they go about it.
24/7. So it wouldn't shock me if he does come to terms with the UFC and he ends up fighting Nate Diaz in a trilogy. But Conor's goal is to negotiate a large deal or just fight out the last two fights on his contract. And I wish more media members, when they have these interviews.
And I got to tell you, I think this is where this particular matter at hand is going to get even more complicated. And let me explain to you why. Because yes, there is a possibility that Conor McGregor can still sign with the UFC, and MMA Joey is right. He could possibly get a fight with other people other than Michael Chandler. He could get a fight with Nate Diaz. He could get a fight with Tony Ferguson. And maybe these fights are a whole lot easier and winnable for him. But I think it would steer him off his goal of trying to get that boxing match with Manny Pacquiao. Now, here's the thing. He went in there with Floyd Mayweather. Is the UFC ready to go in and talk about getting him in there with Manny Pacquiao again and perhaps embarrassing their brand. Now, look, a lot of people said when Francis Ngannou made a great account of himself against Tyson Fury, people were saying, wow, the UFC fumbled the bag on that one because look how great Francis Ngannou did. And then lo and behold, he goes in there with Anthony Joshua and gets slept. And what does Dana White say in the process of that? Well, if Tyson Fury didn't go in there and did not train, or if he went in there and trained, the same exact result would have happened. The only reason why he did great in the beginning was because Tyson Fury didn't train. But leading up to that fight, I'm sorry to tell you guys, I don't see any evidence of that in terms of the accounts of Tyson Fury's camp. They say that he had a great training camp, and he said that he went in there and respected this guy as if he was one of the best boxers in the world. And then he looked like he was in that particular fight, just not with Anthony Joshua. And then they're saying, well, that's what happens when you go in there with a fully prepared boxer when you're Francis Ngannou. But the reality is, a lot of people don't take into consideration that styles make fights. Okay, so if styles don't make fights, I mean, come on, man. I think they're putting way too much stock into that. But again, this is all speculation, right? I'm not the type of person to give you a definitive answer for everything. I'm here to give you varying nuances for you to create your own conclusions. Because I don't even have definitive conclusions myself. I'm still trying to figure out what is what. So the UFC does not want to give Conor McGregor a boxing match with Manny Pacquiao, even if they were to come to terms with a fight with Michael Chandler, a fight with Tony Ferguson, a fight with Nate Diaz in a trilogy. They don't want to give that to him because they don't want to risk it, because in their mind, they really believe that we're just going to send all these UFC guys to get embarrassed by boxers again. And by the way, more on Michael Chandler and what he should do in his career trajectory after we finish this video, and then more on Conor McGregor.
Interviews, and this isn't really MMA media. I wish they would ask him, are you looking to re-sign a new long-term deal, or what is going on? What exactly is going on here? But I believe I know what's going on. He's trying to get out of his deal. He wants to go box in Saudi Arabia, and the UFC is going to have to really make him an offer that he cannot refuse. And then hopefully we get an active Conor McGregor in the UFC. I still have my doubts about that. I definitely wouldn't be leaving my family in early January to prepare for a fight against Conor McGregor that may or may not happen. But all these clips coming together, and you see Dana White, injury, money, movie, blah, 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 so on and so forth. The only thing he wasn't lying about was the movie and the promotion for the movie. Dana White's just blowing smoke up everyone's ass because he's not going to say, oh, we're in negotiations with Conor McGregor. We're trying to sign him to a long-term deal because we...
Yeah, why would they? That's a great point. Why would they do that? They're not going to do that simply because they're just not going to really give you all the information that is not supposed to be public, right? Obviously, contract negotiations are meant for just the private consumption, and that's it, right? It's not meant for any of us to know, and they're not going to tell you, and with good reason, as a result of that. So let's finish off this video, and then I'm going to show you another video in a second.
We don't want him to do what Francis Ngannou did. So I understand why he's lying, but I just find it funny that he uses all these different excuses when really he's just lying to you guys and selling wolf tickets and pretending like this fight's going to happen. And I know people are like, you're already telling me something I already know. I've been covering this for over a year now. And a lot of people were excited. I remember people telling me last summer, Joey, calm down. It's going to happen by the end.
By the way, that's a good point right there, right? And I even have a video on this particular matter at hand. Let me show you right here, right? So look at this right here. This right here was 8 months ago, right? In the border of Mexico. This was me when I was in the border of Mexico and I was covering the Conor McGregor, Michael Chandler. And then right here was last Ramadan, 11 months ago, right? So we're literally in 2 Ramadans, okay, within a span of a year. Obviously, the Islamic calendar is a little bit different. So as a result of that, yeah, you know, that is what we have. We literally have gone through 2 Ramadans while this fight has yet to have happened. So I'm going to play this video for you right here. I'm going to show you exactly what I mean right here. about 60 miles down south is in the borderline of Mexico and California. 100 miles to the north, it is Hollywood, Los Angeles, California. Where am I? I am located in San Diego, in Legoland, out of all places. And I want to tell you why Conor McGregor and the Michael Chandler fight is not going to happen. Well, for one, Conor McGregor seems to have a lot of legal issues going on right now. And although a lot of these accusations seem flimsy and the intentions behind it seem to be monetary driven rather than justice or trying to seek some sort of compensation for some kind of trauma that this person is accusing Conor McGregor of, it's still a burden nonetheless. A burden that he has faced all throughout this years with accusations after accusations. Some may have plausible reasons, and then some just absolutely ridiculous in its in the way that they're trying to convey the story, right? But nonetheless, even if he was to be cleared and to compete against Michael Chandler, the one thing you got to ask yourself is if this guy is competition ready, because in the past few months, while he was filming The Ultimate Fighter, the guy was getting drunk almost every day. Doesn't seem to be a conducive lifestyle to getting ready for a top 5 lightweight such as Michael Chandler. Now, when he fought Khabib, this was really no different in that aspect. So how is it going to be any different now? It doesn't really seem like it will be. And then months later, here we are. Here we are once again in the same similar fashion once again, right? And going back to MMA Joey, what does he have to say about this particular matter at hand?
The end of the year. And I'm like, listen, you're getting your hopes up for nothing. It's not going to happen. And it didn't happen last year. Hopefully it happens this year. I'd love to see Conor back in the cage. I'm curious to see what he looks like after a 3-year layoff. That'll be a massive fight no matter who he fights. So he's in negotiations with the UFC. He has 2 fights left on his deal. We're going to see what happens in 2024. I will continue to scour the internet for important clips of Conor McGregor talking about.
All right. So shout out to MMA Joey for that one right there, right? So on to the next video that I had made regarding Michael Chandler. This was last Ramadan right here.
Conference call, back with another one. That's what I'm talking about. Getting a nice little workout right before I'm about to break my fast for iftar on Ramadan. How many of y'all are training while on Ramadan, while fasting, and then dropping another one of these contents for y'all? So we're about to do an early prediction for Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler while we take a look at the Golden Bridge of Sacramento that we're about to pass. So as I was saying, one of the things that I think is really intriguing about this matchup is that you got McGregor, who is a precise striker. Not only that, you got Michael Chandler, who the way that Islam Makhachev and Khabib describe him as somebody that is what you would say is a sloppy fighter, somewhat of a brawler, street fighter type. Now, does that work out for somebody like Conor McGregor? 100%. Because otherwise, why would Conor even take this fight, considering the streak that he has going on right now? So what I say is that if Michael Chandler does not decide to go and take this to the ground and try to wrestle him, I don't think that it's going to do him any good. Because let's face it, McGregor's #1 Achilles heel throughout these past years have been nothing but wrestling. Chad Mendes, Khabib Nurmagomedov, even Nate Diaz in the final round of their rematch, he took him down. Dustin Poirier has taken him down. A lot of guys have taken him down. McGregor has been taken down and submitted in the regional scenes before he was in the UFC. So it's not highly unlikely that the only way to beat Conor McGregor is through grappling and wrestling and to try to grind him out. The problem is that Michael Chandler is just not that type of guy that will do that. He's not the type of guy that will wrestle McGregor. He's going to want to fight McGregor out of pride. And what do I mean out of pride? He's going to try to want to prove a point that he's a better striker than McGregor. But you can't be a better striker than McGregor if the way that you're going to prove it is through brawling and trying to fight sloppily. It's just not going to happen. Now, we could be wrong. This is why they call it the theater of the unknown. Because obviously it seems that this is Conor McGregor's comeback fight. But at the same time, Michael Chandler, you just don't know what he's going to do. We know what he needs to do, but you just don't know if he's going to do it. So I'm going to go with Conor McGregor, second round stoppage.
I don't know if I share those same sentiments now, to be quite honest with you, after 11 months later, right? I mean, we're talking about 11 months ago that this had happened, right? So here we are in the process of that, right? I got to tell you, man, this right here is, man, it's not looking good. Look, so I was going to tell you guys what I wanted to talk about with Michael Chandler, right? So right now, Michael Chandler is literally waiting and waiting for Conor McGregor. He doesn't want to fight anybody else, right? He just wants to wait it out. Look, here's the thing, right? I know that he's waiting for Conor McGregor because it's a big payday, but here's the problem. Donald Cerrone got paid $200,000 to fight Conor McGregor. Okay? That right there, it's not a very impressive number because he was already locked down in a contract to where his salary was fixed. So Michael Chandler is no different. Michael Chandler right now could have already had 2 fights and have made a ton of money, probably even more money than he would have made in a single Conor McGregor fight based on that. So that's one thing that I wanted to talk about with Conor McGregor. The other thing that I wanted to talk about with Conor McGregor, and something you guys really have to understand, is that perhaps maybe Conor McGregor is already on a decline. A lot of people don't want to take that into consideration, right? I think that at a certain point, you have to take into consideration that, man, it's over for some guys at some point, right? And you just have to know when it's over. But once again, I think that this particular matter at hand is really just going to put Conor McGregor in more stress and more aggravation. And not only that, more uncertainty as a result of that. So one more video I wanted to play for you guys from 5 months ago. This was regarding Conor McGregor and P. Diddy and his time running out as a result. So I decided I was going to title this Conor McGregor and P. Diddy. Reason being, in recent times with Keefy D getting arrested and possibly getting charges on murder for the Tupac case, in terms of just involvement, not necessarily the guy that did the trigger pulling or anything like that, but rather the complicit or some kind of facilitator or ringleader in whatever they can bring up in terms of, let's say, RICO charges, where they bring down a whole entire gang rather than, let's say, an individual criminal act. So nonetheless, one of the things you got to understand is that P. Diddy's time could be coming up. It's been a great ride. And you can almost say that same thing about Conor McGregor. Because the position that Conor McGregor is at right now, I don't honestly think that this guy is in the best shape to get out there and make a comeback. And if he does, being that it is Michael Chandler, it's just a matter of having the right style of matchup that he was afforded to. But later down the line in the top 155 divisions and maybe even the 170, if he wants to try his luck, he's going to have a very difficult time due to the lifestyle that he's been living. And I don't think that's groundbreaking news to say. Everyone says it because it's just the reality of the fact in what you see in front of you. The guy's out there drinking in the pubs when he's doing Ariel Helwani interviews for Matchroom content. He's out there drinking in Anthony Joshua's fights, drinking in Katie Taylor's fights. He shows up in Matchroom fights more than he shows up for UFC events nowadays. And yes, granted, a lot of that is just the simple fact that you're dealing with a regional proximity of Dublin and London being in the same area where it's a lot easier for him to have access in that. So you look at P. Diddy's career. He came from, I guess, humble beginnings, like anybody else that would come up from the world of rap music or in the world of professional fighting athletics. And afterwards, he found riches and success, just like the story of anybody else that we know that we admire or somebody that we aspire to. It's all a very stereotypical story. But you know what else is very stereotypical with P. Diddy and Conor McGregor is that there are going to be rises and then there's going to be big falls. And right now we are witnessing the era of the big fall between them. Is it that far-fetched that with a confession from Keefe D saying that he's the one that got paid or was supposed to get paid in the various stories that he has on this particular subject, could be the reason that, let's say, P. Diddy gets brought up on charges of being complicit of trying to pay for a hitman. And then that just brings down an entire bag of rocks while he's going up a hill in the mountains. Because you look at his life, you really thought in your mind that it's just nothing but up from there, right? From the time that he came out with Mo Money, Mo Problems. After Biggie died, he came out with I'll Be Missing You, a very big hit in the summer of 97. And then you go into his next phase of his career, MTV's The Band. You had Mace, you had The Locks, you had Little Kim. Look, you guys know the discography of P. Diddy and his work in the music industry. And you guys know the work of Conor McGregor as the 2 weight division champion, the double champion, the 145 undisputed and the 155 undisputed. And then on top of that, you have him as one of the few guys who have ever crossed over into boxing, made a whole lot of money, and then created a business out of it. It's very similar to how they're how they were brought up in that similar way, right? And it's also funny that McGregor does have Notorious B.I.G.'s nickname. Not that it has any correlation to anything, but it's just a very strange coincidence that there's parallels between the life of P. Diddy and Conor McGregor right now, and he is the notorious one. And P. Diddy was the man that created the Notorious in terms of creating a rap persona and somebody that he put out there in the world as a main producer. So what a great life, right? He was in that situation with Shine and J-Lo where they shot up a club. He manages to duck and dodge that. P. Diddy seems to duck and dodge a lot of things. He was involved in that shooting during the Biggie murder that night, meaning that he could have been one of the people that got targeted. So Puff has seen his shares of downfalls, just like Conor McGregor has seen his shares of downfalls. And this is an even bigger downfall if Conor McGregor happens to lose his next fight. There's no doubt about that. And then you're going to ask questions. Well, should he continue fighting at this top level? Or maybe he should just go into YouTube boxing, or maybe just stay in MMA or in the UFC and fight lesser competition and make the most money out of it. It's a very complicated situation. But you also got to understand, there's nobody that is bigger than the UFC, even Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor is the biggest star and the biggest name in the industry in the current moment of time. But you also have to understand that it's not far-fetched for him to be taken off the roster, okay, and ending his career in that type of disgraceful manner. It's a possibility. You cannot deny that. And with P. Diddy, guess what? All these things that he's dodged, all these things that he's somehow escaped from, is it finally the time to where he now has to pay the piper? These are some really interesting times, to be quite honest with you. And I'd be curious to see where the career trajectory of both these men are in the next coming months and maybe even the next year, because that's where a lot of this gets really exciting. So guys, like and subscribe, and I hope you We are back with another one. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah. Whoa. Let me tell you something. That type of excitement right there is the type of excitement that Conor McGregor offered to us when he first came into the UFC back in 2013. And as a result of that, this is the reason why the UFC wants Conor McGregor in the 2013, 2014, and maybe even a 2015 version of himself. But that's not what we have in a current modern day, because obviously there are two different types of Conor McGregors, okay? There's the Conor McGregor that we knew on the way up, and then there's the Conor McGregor that we knew now. It is almost literally the same, not the same, different type of people. They are not the same any longer. Just like the famous lines of True Jordy where he says, or I constantly make fun of it, where he goes to the extent of, Conor McGregor is not the same Conor McGregor anymore. And he's not. He's absolutely right about that. He doesn't have the same passion, the same fire and intensity that he does. Just the way that I started this video with fire and intensity, let me tell you why, because I'm hungry. I want to be the top YouTube star in MMA space and in the boxing space and all of combat sports space. That's the type of determination that I got going on right now. That's what I want. I want it. I want to go head to head with all the top MMA content out there. I'm in competition mode. I want to rip everybody's heads off. That's literally how I feel right now going into my YouTube journey. And quite frankly, this is the same feeling that I felt when I did amateur Muay Thai, kickboxing, and MMA. When I competed, I had this same fire and drive in me that I'm doing right now with this YouTube channel. So you don't have that anymore with Conor McGregor. Now imagine a couple of years from now where, let's say, I become a much bigger platform, a much bigger channel. What's going to happen, right? Am I going to have the same fire and drive? The true to God honesty is probably not. Am I going to have the same drive in terms of coming in here and, screaming off the top of my lungs, getting excited, getting all amped up, while I'm about to shoot this video? Am I going to have that same tenacity, that same intensity? Maybe not. But those are just the realities of things when you already have it, and there are others below you that don't have it, that are hungrier than you and are willing to kill the next man in order to get it. This is what the UFC wants to capture with having a character like Conor McGregor as the 2013 version of himself. And it's quite remarkable, really, when I looked at the UFC 5 cover of, it's not a cover, but it's a picture, rather, of how they're going to depict McGregor in the video game. And I thought that it was really fascinating because of the fact that, let's just face it, right? Conor McGregor didn't have tattoos back then, okay? And he didn't have the money. If you remember, he was eating blueberries while he was doing an Ariel Helwani interview. I think it was just right before he made his UFC debut during Ariel Helwani's 2013 episode of the MMA Hour. And that goes to show you how long that show has been running, but that's neither here or there. Now, Why is the UFC motivated in putting on a Conor McGregor that is a 2013, 2015 version of himself? I'm going to tell you why. Because when you're an up-and-coming fighter, people are going to ride with you because they know that, like, well, you don't have all the money in the world. You don't have all the fame and notoriety. But what you have is a skill that everybody knows that can get you to the top, that can get you to superstardom. However, the popularity that Conor McGregor has right now, it's a type of popularity that garners fair weather fans. In other words, these are not hardcore fans of Conor McGregor by any stretch of the imagination, but also you got to take into consideration the base fans that, let's say, Conor McGregor had in terms of the Irish conglomerate of the fans that, let's say, ascended themselves into Las Vegas for the Jose Aldo fight, the two Nate Diaz fights, and the Eddie Alvarez fight in New York. And some can argue many of those people were Irish Americans and not really Irish from, let's say, Dublin or anything like that. They're not around anymore. These people are not around anymore. Why? Because it's no longer 2016. The party has already been done with. Okay, everybody has left the building, metaphorically speaking, and people are now just cleaning up after the party, like the staff and janitors that are coming in there when, let's say, all the what do you call it, these little conventions or these little parties or these little get-togethers of these venues that you use to do that, when it's done and over with, that's what they're doing. They're sweeping things under they're sweeping things and cleaning up. And on top of that, now, like I said, the party is over. It's not that same era anymore. So what are we getting out of Conor McGregor today? What we got is elitism, meaning that he's always been like that in a way where he says, well, I have more money than you, but now it's really a reality to the point where he just has this type of money that is just, well, unrelatable. That's the reality of Conor McGregor today. He's unrelatable. And I think at some point, if you have ambitions of becoming like the Bill Gates of the world, the Elon Musks of the world, the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, when you become this rich, you become unrelatable. Now, these guys, they also try to be relatable, but this is not Conor McGregor in any way, shape, or form. It's not him at all. He doesn't want to relate to you. He doesn't want you to feel like you're anywhere near him. He wants you to feel beneath him. And that's just the reality of Conor McGregor today. That's it. That's just what you're getting out of Conor McGregor. So this is why the UFC feels compelled in putting his 2013 version of himself in a video game when they could just easily have a current Conor McGregor. Imagine that. Can you imagine if you were LeBron James and they gave you a 2005 version of LeBron James as opposed to the current 2023 version of LeBron James that is an LA Laker? Why would they do that? They never done that. They just constantly update you into the next year of the 2K system of EA Sports. And that's it. That's all that you really get out of Conor McGregor nowadays. And a rich, elitist weirdo in terms of how Chael says and describes him to be. But then how does he fire back at Chael with comments like that? He says, well, you're a broke weirdo and this and that. The question is everybody a weirdo to you now that everybody doesn't have the same money as you? But here's one thing that's important to understand. Rising to the top is the greatest journey in sports, not the one before your prime years, not the one after your prime years, but within your prime years. So what the UFC is trying to say is that this was Conor McGregor's prime years, and that is it. That's all that they can really offer, because the new Conor McGregor today, all that is up in the air. So with that, I want to talk about things that are regarding Khabib and Conor McGregor to end this whole entire stream and video. For one, what we saw earlier when we were reacting to MMA Joey's video on Dana White lying about Conor McGregor's contract, Dana White had mentioned about Khabib being, let's say, how do I say this? Somebody that already has a lot of money that doesn't want to fight anymore as a result of that. Well, I'm here to rebuttal Dana White and say I don't think that Khabib's retirement is based on money. And then after I talk about that, I'm also going to talk about Conor McGregor's twilight years of his career, which is right now, and what's going to happen afterwards. And we're going to talk about it on a social level, not so much on the kicks and punches, technical level of mixed martial arts or anything like that. So here it is. Khabib doesn't want to fight anymore for religious reasons. And during this Ramadan, I think it's a best time to really put it bluntly. Why Khabib doesn't want to do that anymore is because, let's just be honest, right? There's a lot of haram that goes into MMA. And what I mean by haram, for those of you that are not savvy in the Arabic language, it means sinful things that are against God, right? Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, what is so sinful about competing in MMA or even training in it? Well, the truth is nothing at all. In fact, it's great for you. And even more so, if you look back in the time of the Prophet Muhammad, he had mentioned that wrestling is one of the best sports that you can get ready for in terms of combat and staying in shape. So there's nothing wrong with the culture of MMA and its gyms and the training aspects of it. However, MMA comes as a business. And by the way, a lot of this relates with Conor McGregor as well when I talk about the business of MMA. The haram aspect that Khabib doesn't want to be a part of with MMA is the gambling aspects, which are very rampant in the world of mixed martial arts and even in boxing, and if not, just all of sports altogether. You've seen a lot of your friends who gambled their lives away, gambled their mortgage away, gambled their salaries away based on games, based on fights, and to no end to the disasters that have come to follow that. So this is one of the things that Khabib doesn't want to be a part of. He doesn't want to be a part of something that is causing destruction to all of mankind. And by the way, if you are a religious Muslim or a very conscious conservative Muslim, you're going to be very aware of these particular situations. You're going to be aware of these things. And then on top of that, you also have to take into consideration, right? If you really want me to hammer this down in understanding Khabib's trajectory, just take a look at the way that he ran the Eagles MMA league as opposed to, let's say, how the UFC runs their league. Obviously, Eagles MMA was a feeder league. And just like most feeder leagues that are Cage Warriors, which one can argue is way bigger than Eagles MMA or even PFL or Bellator, right? The one thing that you notice about them is, yes, they're not like the UFC. Okay, where was I going with that? But what I'm trying to say is that with all these leagues, they're different. They are a feeder league. They're not trying to be the best league out there. But what the UFC has in common with Bellator as opposed to Eagles MMA is they have ring girls, they have alcohol plastered on the mat, which promotes alcohol and all these consumptions of these evil things that a lot of us Muslims don't participate in. And Khabib doesn't want to be a part of that. This is one thing that a lot of people don't really talk about in all of the MMA space. And that alone, you should like and subscribe to my channel because I'm giving you a particular take that no other MMA channel is giving you, which is that Khabib does not want to come back into mixed martial arts, not because of money, not because he has too much of it. And maybe that's a big part of it as well, because he's a man that's content living in the mountains and doesn't really need much, but is happy to be living comfortably with the money that he has received as a result of it. But, however, you have to understand there is the aspect of where Khabib still has to train his guys. They still have their obligations to their career. So he's going to be a part of that in some kind of way. But to actually go back into the fight game, I think that is false, and that is something that he is not going to do. Now, to end us all with Conor McGregor, I got to tell you that time ticks for all man, right? Time goes by really quickly. I know friends of mine that are now fathers and mothers of teenagers, which ironically, you kind of look back in time and think, man, you know what? These kids used to be toddlers. Now they're 10 years old. Now they're teenagers. And lo and behold, where has the time gone? And next thing you know, they're off to college and they're off doing their own lives and living their own lives. And you ask yourself, where has the time gone? Well, this is no different in combat sports and in sports, period. We see all of our heroes compete all throughout the years, and they dwindle, they regress, and then on top of that, the ride is over, just like that, right? So we have to be very cognizant of these things, and at the same time, I think Conor McGregor knows that, but he also wants to get the most out of his final years. So that's all that I really have for this particular topic at hand. I hope you guys enjoyed this 2-hour stream. And I hope you guys like and subscribe so I can drop more hot content like this. And Ramadan Kareem. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to all the Muslims around the world and to all those that follow this page and enjoy the same enthusiasm that we have for this wonderful sport known as mixed martial arts. Welcome to the Theater of the Unknown. I hope you guys like and subscribe, and I will see you guys on the next one, inshallah.